afternoon again, Bill.
Hello, Mark. Well, welcome to our third podcast for the day. It's been a bit full on, hasn't it?
It has, and once again, lots of people that have been fascinating to chat with and find out their stories.
And some interesting lessons learnt along the way.
Absolutely.
Right.
So who have we got next? Who's our next victim? No, I shouldn't say that, should I?
I want to introduce you to somebody who I sat next to at a Geelong Manufacturing Awards dinner the other night. Never met Robert Bruce before, but we've since made contact, and I found out a bit more about Robert, and I thought his history, and he has, from what I understand, would be of great interest to our listeners.
Excellent.
Anyway, that's why he's here today, having driven from way down the South Great Ocean Road to Melbourne and back to Geelong and then back home again.
So, we'll be short and punchy with it. So, welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Bill and Mark. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, I've got to ask you, have you got Scottish blood with a name like Robert Bruce? There's got to be a Scottish link, is there?
We did have a relative in the 1800s do a full excavation of the family tree, and it does go back even earlier than Robert Bruce.
Oh, wow. To
the Vikings.
Yeah, okay. My childhood was in Scotland. So as soon as I saw the name, I thought it's got to have a Scottish connection.
Yes.
No, fantastic. So, and Robert, what's you're with Whitelaw and
Whitewater Reinventions and Lean Enterprise
Lean
Australia.
Enterprises. So roughly what do they do? And then we'll come to that at the end.
So Lean Enterprise Australia is part of the Lean Global Network and created by the founders of Lean. So post Deming, you've got John Shook, Jim Womack, who actually created the word lean for that principle. So it's part of that body, and I really enjoy that work, working with large, small, medium businesses on really creating a lean transformation in their businesses.
And my experience, Robert, on that, having worked with a lot of family companies, is that you mention the word lean and they just look at you, their eyes glaze over, and you try and convince them that if you go through this process, you'll be far better off in the future, but by God, it's a hard sell. Right?
It is, and we'll come back to that. Let's just touch on Whitewater. So Whitewater, for me, carries that lean DNA, because you can't get that out of me. But combined with, I'm lucky to have met a guy called Adam Salzer, who's now 73. I call him the wise old wizard. So Adam's done about 150 major global business transformations. So Rolls-Royce, Cathay Pacific. Wow. He was part of PwC and then came out of PwC, and he's taken that IP with him. So basically 5 years ago we got together. So I'm a co-founder of Whitewater, and then developed that more. So
good.
I've naturally bought in.
All right, we'll get into that.
Stuff.
So let's go back to the beginning. Where was primary school?
Wow. So I don't know if you can hear it in my accent, but there's a Brit hiding under here. So I'm a northern lad, born in Yorkshire, and primary school just south of Manchester.
Okay, all right. And high school?
High school.
Or comprehensive school, was it, in those days?
Yep. Yes. So I went through the state system, which did me okay. So Poynton County High School, just on the border of the Peak District.
And while you were going through high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to do when you grew up?
That's a great question. I don't know when the thought came, but I've always been interested in stripping things apart and putting them back together and improving them. And then I think probably when I was about 18 or 20, I had this bee in my bonnet about wanting to be a bastion of manufacturing. So I've really gone through that sort of operations and then more generalist business management route, but I've never really got away from the joy and the smell and the look in people's eyes of the shop floor.
Okay, cool.
Well, I can tell you, Robert, I used to love stripping things apart, and particularly old cars with a couple of mates, but we can never get them back together again.
I do remember there was one motorbike, I was about 11 and I'd stripped it, and at the end when I put it all together, there was one ball bearing about 5 millimetres diameter.
And where's it from?
Right deep in the engine. So I had to strip it all back.
But
again.
now you mentioned Manchester. Manchester's an interesting city, and just by circumstance, I ended up going there a long time ago, and I got an internship in an engineering company in Manchester. There are over 1,000 guys working there, and it was in the 60s. And most of them in that factory had never spoken to an Australian. I think I mentioned this before, Mark, had never spoken to an Australian since the war.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe the size of this place. It was a foundry and engineering and manufacturing company. And then my vivid memory, which I'll repeat, is at 3:30 in the afternoon where they were all lined up at the Bundy clocks.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
But they were all dressed. They were on their bikes with their Gladstone bags, all ready to go. They probably knocked off an hour earlier. Right?
Yeah.
It was just the most... It doesn't leave my memory.
What was the name of the company?
Hinchcliffe & Co.
Right. I'm sure there's a nice building, old factory.
They'll be
building
there,
with that and
cut in the
glazing
stone.
on
That's
the
right.
top of it.
All right, so you want to pull things apart. So did you have a job when you were in high school?
Absolutely.
Part-time? What?
Absolutely. A little family engineering business that my mother was friends with the owners, and from 15 or 16 I'd go down there and work during summers and holidays.
Yeah, well, that's in your blood, and that's probably that got you going. And having come out of high school, what happened next?
I took a practical approach, so I went to what was then a polytechnic.
Yep.
So Trent Polytechnic is now Nottingham University of Trent or something like that, NUT. And I was fortunate at the end of the first year to get an undergraduate apprenticeship with British Aerospace, or BAE, as it now is.
And good to work with?
Oh, fantastic. So we had access to 3 factories around Manchester. So Chadderton, Woodford was where I was based, which is the base or the home of the Vulcan bomber.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you've seen the James Bond movie.
Yep.
Yep.
I've actually seen one.
Nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
And we were directly under the flight path where we used to live. So it was always looking at them as a boy thinking, oh, wouldn't that be great to play with those things?
And you did.
So I did, yeah.
Well, then that probably morphed into the Concorde at one stage, that technology.
There's a very common platform with the engines and the delta wings.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when you left that part of your education, what happened next?
I was then a little restless. I thought, do I really want to go back? I needed a bit of space at the end of my degree. Do I want to go back and just get into a full-time job, or do I want to go and explore? So my brother and I set off on a trip, one of those round-the-world air tickets with about 20 stops.
Yep.
And we ended up in Australia. But I'd met my first wife in New Zealand before, on the hop before. So Melbourne became home.
Okay.
On and off.
Okay. And so first job here in Melbourne?
First job here was not in Melbourne. It was
okay.
in Corio.
Okay, down this way.
Silcraft.
Oh,
used
yes.
to be,
That way.
Automotive. Sorry,
That
that
way.
way. Yeah. Automotive,
We're pointing, by
injection
the way.
moulding. So I was designing badges for cars and creating the moulds to do that. That was my
Because
first
there was a
job.
lot of car parts manufactured around Geelong, wasn't
Few
there?
foundry,
Lots of small businesses.
There were. So there's a particular Saab 9000 badge that
You designed.
Sometimes I see them around and
You're lucky to see a Saab that was still on the road.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
Yeah, well, that was out in that north part of Geelong, of course, where it was all manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the services to Ford and Harvester and all those other companies would have kept a lot of small businesses alive in those days.
And all gone.
Well, that's right. As I said in the
Moved
this morning's interview, robots have taken over.
Yeah, more change.
That's right.
So next job after that, where did that take you?
ICI out at Deer
okay.
Park.
Yep.
ICI Plastics.
Yep.
As a process engineer for their film division, so
Yep.
packaging film. And also a new creation of film for nappies.
Oh, wow.
Some would say it was a...
Well, that's, interesting.
Well, much needed.
That's
right.
Very important.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
Now, okay, then you picked up some amazing jobs reading your profile, which involved working around Asia and things like that. You want to sort of, how did you end up or slip in, how did you slide in there? Or what tipped you into there?
So
Yeah.
that desire to pursue that
Yep.
sort of operational hierarchy stream. So the next job after ICI was BTI Nilex. That was my first management role,
Yeah.
25, 26. Challenging facility. It was down at Frankston, it was
Yep.
the extrusion moulded division. They made product for the factory next door that was used for door trims.
All right. Yeah.
And it was the launch of the EF Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
It was a massive disaster. I was still running the small plant that did the extruded sheet. They were stopping Ford 13 times a day. They were helicoptering stuff to Ford. So we'd done a turnaround in the small factory, and somebody had obviously seen myself and some other young engineers from Swinburne turning that facility around, engaging with the shop floor, problem solving.
Yep.
And said, well, we're not doing very well next door. Shall we stick these guys into the bigger facility? So we went from like 30 employees to 250, $200 million business, Ford, GM, Mitsubishi. So it was baptism by fire.
Yep.
And we had an excellent coach, Sensei, who'd been taught the Toyota production
Yep.
way. Jeff Young, one of those key influential people in my career. And we turned the Ford line round in 3 months, and we were appointed Ford's most improved supplier, and just massive change in the metrics, engagement, quality, lead time, and then we transformed the rest of the plant.
Because the Toyota ethos, if you like, was well respected, well known. It was sort of held up. So what do you think made Toyota be that smart, that engaging, and the rest of the world didn't quite get it? And then Toyota, they started to get and do that all around the world, didn't they? That whole Toyota production line.
So it's a great question, and it links back to one of the comments that you made before we kicked off. Many people misunderstand lean. They think it's a set of tools, some silver bullets, but it's not. It has to be led by the right mindset.
Yep.
If you get the right mindset, leadership are in, you can make magic happen. And then you follow with the tools. If you just go in, and many people still do, just with, I call them tool merchants,
Yep.
it will fail.
So you've got to take your production line with you and all this.
It's
They've all got to be part of the understanding.
it's got to be treated like a transformation.
I call it's
where
like a fog. It's got to become, I guess, it's got to touch everyone.
Yep.
That's what has to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, for it to work properly.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So that then led obviously to bigger and better then, once you had that sort of under your
Yes,
hat.
we then moved up to Sydney for a couple of years. I ran the foundry for BTR up in Sydney. That was an induction by fire in terms of it was like a hybrid situation where it was an ancient foundry, so it's a pretty
Sand
heavy. Yep.
Yep.
They had Diesematic automated moulding machine in place, but the foundry itself, the smelter was out of date. So upgrading that technology, less people. You got 4 different unions on site, and that was only 27, I think. So that was my first real induction with communicating with unions, having to make massive productivity improvements with a smaller footprint, with a smaller workforce. But we got through that, and not without some interesting parts where 5 a.m. in the morning, when I arrive, the shop steward is standing in my parking spot,
waiting for you.
So you're going to have a good day straight off. But yeah, all good lessons.
Excellent. And I noticed, I think it was on your LinkedIn profile, you were at Amazon at one stage.
Yeah.
What led to that?
So after BTR, that was where I really started to be a bit of a globetrotter with Autoliv, Swedish company, airbags, seatbelts, hyper growth. Back in that time with applying airbags and seatbelts to automobiles. So I got a bit of a taste for that excitement of hyper growth and moving at speed. Very good organisation. So I spent 10 years with them.
Yep.
And then and also lived in 3 countries. So Japan for 4, Thailand for 2, Philippines for 1. And then we came back. We'd got 2 kids by then. That was my first marriage. So that's Maddie and Dan. They're 27 and 26. And then, of course, young David. And then I went in to run the low voltage business for Olex Cables as a private equity partner in a management equity setup. 4 years doing a transformation there. And then the Vistaprint story. 2010. So this is where I sort of reinvented myself, because it was all pretty heavy manufacturing. Vistaprint, very different model. It's what I would call fizzy-dig. So it's the digital with a seamless transition into the physical. So Vistaprint really invented mass customization. Some very clever guys, good software. And they wanted to start, I got a phone call, they wanted somebody who could build a site and get operational in 6 months.
Wow.
This is one of the other influential people in my career, Leslie Austin. Normally headhunters, you just get them, put the phone down. But Leslie said, somebody said that you're the only person crazy enough to take this on, because it needs to be done in 6 months. And building a new facility, getting it operational in 6 months is going to be a tall order. I said, that sounds interesting. And it was when everything was being offshored to China. But this was to build a greenfield site in Derrimut in Melbourne. And I said, I'm on the hook, let's talk more. And learnt a heap that then set me up for Amazon. So that whole value of time, disruptive business models, really based around short lead time and meeting that consumer need for people quickly. So that's when I got that sort of real deep understanding of the power of that to grow a business rapidly.
What they like to work for?
Good. Yeah, no, it was a good 5 years. So I led the startup, so I was the first bum on the seat. Was able to build the team, which you have to take as a real honour to be able to be that first person, because if you stuff it up and you don't treat it with the respect it deserves, you've got a plate of spaghetti very quickly. So creating that culture right from day one, you need some pretty special people around you. So I was lucky to be able to pull a great team together.
Well, it's interesting. In the last month, I bought something from Vistaprint, right? And I bought something from Amazon.
There you go.
Now, Vistaprint, I've never used it before, but I knew people were using it a lot. And I wanted a puffer jacket with my company logo on it. And I thought, I'll just get one and see what it looks like. Went online, put my logo on, there was the design, click, click, click. And a week later, it's delivered.
Yep.
And then with the Amazon, both you and... Did you buy your books from Amazon?
Yep.
Mark and I both bought books about AI from a friend of ours who we did a podcast with. I bought 10 for some staff and a client. You bought 10 or 20.
Yep.
Both off Amazon. Once again, click this, click that, pay, and it arrives. That's the model I know.
Yep. So short lead times.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, the logic of how the Vistaprint system works, it's actually, in my opinion, smarter, more sophisticated than Amazon.
Okay.
In some respects.
Yep.
Because you're actually manufacturing something.
You are.
You are manufacturing a custom product that's only unique for you. It's got your name on.
Yes.
Bill.
Yeah,
Mark.
it's not as if you're selling 1,000 bill jackets, is it?
And you're doing it in as short a lead time as Amazon can deliver a book.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of other activity that has to go on. It's not just the 5 steps of the Amazon model. There's a lot more involved. So that's where I sort of really... Well, I launched the plant on lean principles and lean mindset, but had to adapt it for mass customization and really squeezing those lead times down. So we started at 24-hour lead times. After 5 years, we were down to less than 5 hours of lead time. It meant that we could then take on the Japanese market from Melbourne.
Interesting.
So we took the business from the Dutch facility, Vistaprint Dutch facility. They were supplying in maybe 2 weeks or more. When we took the business on, we were doing it in a week to Japan. And then I got a group of people together and said, look, I've just come back from Japan and I'd done that trip many, many times. If it takes me 18 hours from the doorstep of the plant to get into the centre of Tokyo, we're now down to a 4 or 5 hour lead time. Why can't we have a cut-off AM Tokyo time and be delivering at 9:30 a.m. in the morning on the doorstep?
Yeah.
So let that percolate for a couple of weeks, and then Andrew Leggett, who's a brilliant logistics guy, professional, came back and said, I've worked it out. The Qantas QF20 that you go from Sydney to Narita back in the day, it's empty on the way out of Sydney other than some fresh lobster. They can give us a really good deal.
Yep.
And I can get Australia Post to get it to Sydney before the 8:30 flight. Bang, organised clearance in Narita, Japan Post and Sagawa, and we were able to deliver next day.
That's very good.
That's the reverse. In fact, whilst
That's
we're
very good.
talking in this gear that we've got here, which is our podcast gear, we actually, and we've told this story before, we went on Amazon, had a look at it, right, paid the money, it arrived, 4 or 5 days later?
Oh, no, 24 hours, I reckon.
Or was it? Yeah. And went on Facebook, followed the instructions.
YouTube.
Oh, YouTube. Guy, you were probably paying more attention than I was.
That's okay.
And here we are. This is episode 124, I think it is.
Like
Wow.
But it's
Well
interesting
done.
that the whole process, that how things change and evolve. And so as you're telling your story, I can see where this is taking you, because you're obviously had some good mentors, which is
Yep.
really, but it's focused you on how to be efficient, faster, strip costs, get people involved, bring everything together, and say there's your better result. So is that how you got into the whole lean?
Yeah, and you
Universe
you
as
sort
such?
of really when you do a greenfield. So it was not the first greenfield that I'd done. I'd done some with Autoliv, but it was the first one that I was responsible for everything.
Yep.
And to launch, to pick the team that you think have the right mindset, to train everybody in lean principles from day one, and to start off that way, it really amazed me how powerful it was.
Yep.
I mean, the team didn't set out to win any awards. That wasn't what we were about. We were about to crush lead time and, be really
Yep.
efficient at what we did. Printing facilities are pretty dirty places traditionally.
Yep.
This was cleaner than any hospital I've seen. They ended up getting the first Shingo Prize in the country. The first Shingo Prize for a printing facility globally, and the youngest plant ever to get a Shingo Prize.
And for people listening, a Shingo Prize is?
It's described, if you look online, it's described as the sort of the Nobel Peace Prize of operational excellence.
Fantastic.
And it's based out of Utah University.
Excellent.
Right.
Cool.
Now, Robert, in Australia, my observation is that, and we deal in the small and medium enterprise area, is that there's very few examples of Australian businesses in that segment who understand or take up the lean philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that a philosophy? I call it the Toyota way because I've got 6 books in my garage all about it.
Yep.
So what's the situation in Australia now as far as take up? And you and I both have probably you have worked it. I've had a touch of it, and I know it makes such a difference. So, am I right in saying it hasn't been taken up much by small to medium enterprises?
There are some companies that have done it very well. With the loss of the automotive industry, there's been a sort of loss of some of that capability, some of the benchmark facilities, of which one was Autoliv. But I think there's a renewed curiosity, to be honest, is what I'm sensing where I go. And people have heard, yes, the bad stories, but they have also heard some of the stories about if you do it right, it can be incredibly powerful. So I think there is a renewed curiosity. Maybe this is a segue before we go to Amazon, but I've actually been doing some work, quite a lot of work in Adelaide. Adelaide is booming at the moment, especially in defence. And we got contacted, this was Lean Enterprise, regarding a supplier in that bracket, small to medium, traditionally a job shop, do a lot of mining work, a lot of one-off work, and they'd won a big contract for some military ships to supply those with 2 families of product. That's a different game.
Yep.
So the ship is digitally designed. It's not 10,000 of one part. There's the volume of, I'm just making the numbers
Yep.
up, but 25,000 for one ship. There's X of them.
Yep.
And every single part is different because it's been digitally designed to be acoustically silent. You don't want vibrating bits around the place. So you can imagine, yes, a jobbing shop is interested, but then when they realise that it's actually mass production volumes, but every single one is different, that's when the alarm bell went up and the managing director owner rang us and said, can you come and have a chat? Can you come and have a look? This was back in July.
At least he identified, he knew the issue and he knew where to go.
No, brilliant. I mean, he reminds me of one of my best bosses, actually, in terms of his his curious mindset, knows what he doesn't know,
Yep.
but is willing to go out and explore to find the gap.
Get the solution.
Yep, exactly. So we went in and started a project in August. They had a huge backlog. The forecast was increasing by 550% in September, October. And they had other major issues. By December, all backlog gone. 550% ramp done. All in good nick. Lead time, come back to my golden metric of lead time. When we did the current state, which was the old state, 97 days for one of the products from in the receiving door with the product to out on a pallet to the customer, 97 days. I went 2 weeks ago, 4.5 days.
That's amazing.
From 97 to 4.5. The second family of product from 67 to 3.
So do they prostrate themselves in front of you when you walk in the door?
They genuflect. Right.
The owner was vindicated, so he feels vindicated. But
But
you always get some hard nuts in those businesses.
Oh,
I mean,
they've been there for years.
This is a grinding, welding,
Yeah.
cutting plate
Yeah.
business. And I said, stick them into the team. We'll have some fun. And they were some of the best, most engaged people in the project.
That's right.
So Robert, how do people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
They find me
On LinkedIn?
Literally find me.
Yes, on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Or the website for
or the website for Lean Enterprise Australia, or on the website for Whitewater Reinventions.
And failing that, get in touch with me and I will pass the details on. But I just want to say that the little bit of lean I've experienced in some of the assignments I've had, I would recommend anybody in a process business or a manufacturer, and food companies, let's not forget food.
Absolutely.
Right? You will never understand before you start this process the improvement it's going to make to your business. That's what my observation is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just manufacturing or fast-moving consumer goods. It is any business. I've done work in service businesses, oil and gas, and the dials don't move by 5%. I don't get up out of bed for less than 30% improvement. Significant improvements in any type of business.
Robert, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fascinating journey.
Thank you, Robert.
And I've learned a lot just listening, and inspired, I must say. So thank you, Robert, and good luck with all the
you.
lean projects ahead of you.
Thank you.